The day I became a reporter for the paranormal wasn't the day I expected to leave my old job. I was a standard investigative reporter for a local news outlet, chasing down stories about politics, crime, and the occasional human interest piece. Life was predictable. A little boring, sure, but predictable. Then I got a call that changed everything. It started with a strange tip. At first, I dismissed it like any reasonable journalist would. The anonymous voicemail described a haunting at a rundown hotel in a small town just outside the city. The caller claimed they had evidence. Photographs, strange noises recorded on tape, and even a few eyewitness accounts of ghostly apparitions walking through walls. I thought it was some kind of prank or a marketing stunt for a haunted attraction. But there was something about the tone of the message, urgent, trembling, almost pleading, that gnawed at me. It wasn't typical for someone to go to the effort of setting up such a story unless they were either incredibly invested or genuinely terrified. The call was followed by an email with a few blurry photos attached, shadows that seemed to move, a door that appeared to open on its own in one image, and an orb floating eerily in another. The grainy photos only added to the mystery. Was it fake? Probably, but I was curious. So I packed up my camera and microphone and decided to check it out. That decision set me on a path I couldn't have prepared for. The hotel, an old Victorian building, was exactly as you would imagine a haunted house to be. Creaky floorboards, dark hallways, faded wallpaper peeling at the corners. The moment I walked inside, I felt the air shift. It wasn't like the feeling of entering an old dusty building. It felt alive, like the hotel itself was waiting for something. The staff, or rather the one person on duty, didn't seem fazed by anything. She was a middle-aged woman with graying hair, glasses perched on the edge of her nose, and a thin smile that made it clear she'd seen her fair share of oddball guests. She handed me a key to room 13. Of course, it had to be room 13, and with a casual nod, sent me up to investigate. But the moment I stepped into that room, I knew something was different. There was a thick, palpable silence, the kind that presses in on your eardrums and a lingering chill in the air. It wasn't cold enough to be uncomfortable, but it felt wrong, like the air had been drained of warmth. The furniture was old, the bed covered with a dusty quilt, and the window curtains hung limply as though they hadn't been moved in years. Still, it wasn't the decor that unsettled me. It was the feeling, like someone was watching me, waiting. I set up my camera, figuring I would document the space for a few hours, check for any unusual occurrences, and call it a day. But as I moved through the room, setting up my equipment, I noticed something that made my skin prickle. The photos on the wall were all taken at the hotel, and in each one, the faces of the people in the pictures seemed off. Their eyes were hollow, their expressions frozen in time, and some even appeared to be looking right at me despite the angle. I tried to shake it off as a trick of the light. I wasn't new to the strange and unexplained, odd noises, unverified claims, spooky photographs, but there was something about this room that unsettled me on a deeper level. Still, I wasn't about to jump to conclusions. I sat down and started reviewing my notes, flipping through old articles I had written on similar topics. But as I sat there, the air seemed to grow heavier, and I couldn't ignore the strange noises that began to seep through the silence. First, it was a soft scratching sound, like nails against wood, coming from the hallway. I figured it was just the old building settling, but the sound didn't stop. It grew louder, closer. Then came the voices. At first, I thought they were coming from another room, or perhaps the hotel staff. But when I listened more carefully, I realized that the voices weren't talking to each other. They were talking to me. In the quiet of the room, the whispers began, hushed but clear. Leave. The word echoed in my mind. I stood up, turning around quickly, expecting someone to be standing in the doorway. But no one was there. I moved toward the door, checking to see if it was open, but it was still firmly locked. I grabbed my camera, unsure of what was happening, but feeling compelled to document every second. The whispers came again, louder now, and a cold breeze seemed to sweep through the room, sending a shiver down my spine. I turned the camera on, aiming it at the empty room, and as the camera's viewfinder clicked into place, something caught my eye. Something I hadn't seen before. In the corner of the frame, in the reflection of the old mirror above the dresser, I saw a figure. A shadowy figure standing just behind me. I turned quickly, but the space was empty. The figure was gone. I felt my heart race, my hands trembling as I lowered the camera. I wasn't sure what I was dealing with, but the undeniable sense of presence in the room had just escalated. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, and the temperature in the room dropped several degrees, making the hairs on my neck stand on end. I had come here to investigate, to write a story, but now I was the story. I couldn't shake the chill that crept through my body, nor could I dismiss the growing sense of dread that seemed to fill every corner of the room. I stood there, my camera hanging loosely from my neck, my fingers still trembling as I glanced around, hoping, desperately, that I was just imagining things. But as the whispers continued to echo in the corners of my mind, I knew better. This wasn't a trick of the imagination. Something was here. I couldn't leave, not yet. I was here for a story, and I wasn't going to leave empty-handed. The truth was, deep down, I was fascinated, almost mesmerized by the strangeness of it all. Paranormal phenomena weren't new to me. I'd covered odd events before, written articles on sightings and strange happenings, but this was different. This house felt alive in a way I couldn't explain. The cold air, the whispers, the presence I couldn't see but could definitely feel. It all pointed to something far beyond a simple haunting. I stood still for a moment, just listening, trying to catch my breath. The whispers had stopped, but I could still feel their lingering presence, like an invisible hand brushing against my skin. I turned my head slowly, looking at the mirror where I'd seen the shadowy figure before. My reflection was unchanged, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to move. The door to the hallway was still locked, the same oppressive silence hanging in the air. The hotel had an ancient, almost forgotten smell to it. Old wood, dust, the faint scent of mildew. The rooms, even those untouched for years, seemed to hold on to memories, each one layered upon the next. And in this room, those memories were heavy. Too heavy. I decided to check the window, hoping the fresh air might help clear my mind. Maybe there was a draft in the room that was causing the temperature to drop, or maybe I was just letting my imagination get the best of me. But when I stepped toward the window, something caught my eye. The room didn't look the same. The shadows in the corners seemed darker, more defined, and the air felt thicker, like the atmosphere itself had become charged. I turned to face the room again, but this time something was different. The floorboards creaked as though someone was moving behind me, and when I glanced over my shoulder, I saw nothing, but I didn't need to see to know something was there. I could feel it, like an electric buzz in the air. The temperature continued to drop. I could see my breath in the air now, white wisps escaping my lips, but the chill wasn't just in the air. It was in my bones, creeping up from the tips of my toes, rising higher and higher until it felt like my very skin had turned to ice. I needed to get out, to leave this room before it consumed me. But something kept me rooted in place. I knew that leaving wouldn't change anything. Whatever was here, whatever was in this hotel, wasn't going to let me leave that easily. The whispering started again. This time, it wasn't just a faint murmur. The voices were louder, clearer, as if they were right next to me. Stay, stay and listen. The voice was sweet and coaxing, and yet there was a chilling undertone to it, a sense of something far darker beneath the surface. I turned in a circle, searching for the source, but the room remained empty. I glanced at the bed, the old curtains, the dusty nightstand. Nothing had changed, and yet everything felt wrong. The voices grew more insistent. We are waiting for you to understand. My head was spinning now. I had to get out. I reached for the door handle, but as my fingers closed around it, a strange force stopped me. The handle seemed to shift, almost like it was moving in my hand, twisting and warping. I tried again, but it wouldn't budge. The door was locked from the inside. Panic surged through me, but I couldn't let it control me. I couldn't let the house win. This was just a building, just a haunted hotel. There had to be an explanation for all of this. There had to be something I could do. I took a step back, my thoughts racing as I scanned the room once more. The mirror, the whispers, the cold, everything was connected. I was sure of it now. The hotel wasn't just haunted, it was an entity in itself. It was feeding off of me, feeding off of the fear I had built up over the years of covering paranormal stories. And then I heard it, a soft, slow scraping sound from the wall beside me, like claws against wood. I turned slowly, my heart pounding. The wall wasn't just still, it was moving. The wallpaper that had once been faded and peeling was now shifting, rippling like water disturbed by an unseen force. The scratching grew louder, more frantic, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to grow more pronounced, stretching out toward me as if reaching for my soul. I turned back to the door. I had to leave. I didn't care what was happening here. I couldn't stay, but when I reached for the door again, the light in the room flickered and died. The room plunged into complete darkness. It's too late. The whisper came again, this time cold and sharp, cutting through the blackness like a knife. You opened the door. Now you are ours. The darkness pressed in on me, suffocating, until it wasn't. I felt the air shift again, and suddenly I wasn't alone. I wasn't alone anymore. I couldn't see a thing. The darkness around me was suffocating, complete, as though the very air had thickened to a point where I couldn't breathe. I reached out, but my hands met nothing but empty space, and the chill in the room seemed to intensify with every second. My heart was thumping in my chest, loud and fast, the only sound that I could hear now, besides the steady, eerie scraping noise that still echoed around me. It was coming from the walls, but the sound was shifting, moving like it was following me, coming from all directions. I took a step forward, slow, cautious, my feet moving with reluctance. My shoes made no sound on the floor, and I quickly realized it was because the floor wasn't wooden anymore. It felt soft, almost damp, like the ground was covered in moss or some other kind of organic material. I stopped again, unsure of what was happening, but everything in me screamed to get out. Get out. But where? The door was still locked, and the darkened space around me seemed to press in further with every breath I took. I closed my eyes, trying to calm myself, to make sense of what was happening. But no matter how many times I took a deep breath, the suffocating, icy feeling wouldn't lift. This wasn't just a haunted hotel anymore. It was something worse. This place, this house, wasn't just playing tricks on me. It was changing. Suddenly, I felt something brush past me. Cold fingers, icy and light, skimming my skin. I jerked back, but there was no one there, nothing tangible. Just a whisper of touch, but it felt real, like something unseen had reached out and grazed me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as my breath caught in my throat. Stay. The voice was quiet but distinct. It came from everywhere, swirling around me like smoke. I spun around, but there was no one. Nothing in the dark room but me. And yet I could feel them. I could feel it. Something was watching me. Something that wasn't human. The scraping noise grew louder again, and this time it was accompanied by a soft, rhythmic tapping. It was slow at first, almost like a heartbeat, but as it continued, it grew faster, more insistent. I could feel the vibration of the tapping reverberating in my bones, making my skin crawl. Then, just as quickly as it had started, the tapping stopped. For a moment, there was nothing, just silence. But the silence wasn't comforting. It was expectant, like something was waiting for me, watching me, daring me to make a move. I reached for my phone, praying that the flashlight would work. But as soon as I pulled it from my pocket, the light flickered, struggling to stay on. My hand shook, but I steadied it, clicking on the flashlight. The beam pierced through the darkness, but what I saw made my stomach drop. The walls, what I had once assumed were simply old and decayed, were now covered in markings. Deep, jagged lines crisscrossed the wallpaper, forming strange symbols and patterns. They were etched into the wood itself, dug into the surface as if someone, or something, had carved them there long ago. But the strangest part? They were moving. The lines seemed to pulse, slowly but surely, as though they were alive, writhing beneath the thin layer of paint. My pulse quickened, and I backed away from the walls, trying to escape the feeling that the room itself was closing in on me. I didn't know what was happening, but the sense of wrongness was suffocating. The house was breathing, and it was waiting. You shouldn't have come back. The voice wasn't a whisper this time. It was clear, direct, almost mocking. I spun around, my breath caught in my throat, and then I saw it. In the corner of the room, just beside the door, was a shadow, slightly darker than the rest of the darkness, its shape flickering like it wasn't fully formed. It moved, sliding along the walls, the edges of it stretching like ink in water, pulling itself toward me. I opened my mouth to scream, but nothing came out. The shadow was now moving faster, flowing toward me with a speed that sent my heart into overdrive. I turned toward the door, desperate to escape, but the lock was still in place. The air around me seemed to close in, the temperature dropping even further, and I could feel the cold, thick fingers of the house reaching for me. Without thinking, I pulled at the door again, twisting the handle, but it was still locked. My panic rose. My mind screamed at me to think, to do something, but I felt paralyzed. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the shadow stopped, right in front of me. It was a figure now, tall and thin, its form shifting, like smoke caught in a breeze. I couldn't make out any features, only the outline of a figure that seemed to twist and bend at unnatural angles. The air around it shimmered, like it was somehow distorting reality itself. The figure extended a hand toward me, long fingers stretching, the tips glowing faintly. My body locked up. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. "You've already crossed the line." The voice came again, closer now, and the words cut through me, sharp and painful. "Now, you belong to the house." And with that, the shadow seemed to pull at me, like I was being drawn into it, into the darkness. My vision began to blur as the walls around me faded, and I felt myself falling deeper into the void. I felt the floor vanish beneath me, and the weight of the world seemed to press in from all sides. The air was thick, suffocating, as I descended deeper into the abyss. The shadows, once distant, now seemed to surround me, engulfing me in their darkness. I was falling, but I couldn't tell where to or how long it had been. The fall felt endless, like I'd been plummeting for hours. Every time I thought I was about to hit the ground, I was pulled further into the void. The whispers returned, louder this time, their voices distinct, speaking in unison. "You belong here." The words wrapped around my mind like a vice, tightening with each repetition. I fought to resist, to make sense of what was happening. But the more I struggled, the deeper I sank into the darkness. Then, suddenly, the pull stopped. I was no longer falling, but I didn't feel the ground beneath me. I opened my eyes and gasped, staring into an endless expanse of blackness, a void that stretched far beyond anything I could comprehend. There was no floor, no walls, no ceiling, just a vast emptiness that seemed to extend into infinity. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My body felt weightless, suspended in space, but not in the way that being weightless should feel. There was something unsettling about it. I was caught in a space between worlds, trapped in the space between life and death, and the feeling of isolation was more intense than anything I'd ever experienced. The house, the hotel, wasn't just a building. It was alive. It had drawn me in, had consumed me in its infinite, suffocating void. And now, I was trapped in its heart. I tried to call out, but the words wouldn't form. There was no sound here, no echoes, no space for anything to exist except the overwhelming presence of the house itself. I reached out with my hands, trying to grasp something, anything to ground myself, but there was nothing. My fingers passed through the emptiness as though there was nothing solid to hold on to. And then, through the thick blackness, I saw it, a sliver of light. Faint at first, but growing brighter as I focused on it. It was a doorway. I could feel it pulling me toward it, like a magnet drawing me closer. I had to move. I had to get to that door. The thought consumed me, and my feet, though weightless, started to propel me forward. As I moved closer to the light, the shadows seemed to recede, and I could feel the oppressive pressure easing off me, but only slightly. When I reached the doorway, I hesitated, unsure of what to expect. The light from within wasn't harsh, but soft, glowing with an unnatural warmth. It felt inviting, like something familiar. But I had learned not to trust the house's tricks. It was an illusion, a lure. I had to be careful. The whispers returned, louder now, more insistent. "Come inside. Let us show you." I shuddered. I didn't know what I was stepping into, but I had no other choice. I had to face whatever this was. I stepped forward, crossing the threshold, and immediately felt the air shift. The warmth from the light wrapped around me, but it didn't feel comforting. It felt like a warning. I blinked as my surroundings shifted, as if I had crossed into another realm entirely. The room I found myself in was not like anything I had expected. It wasn't the dark, empty void I'd been in before, but a space that felt wrong. The walls were covered in tapestries, old and faded, their images depicting scenes I couldn't understand. The furniture was ancient, covered in a layer of dust that had clearly been undisturbed for decades. The air smelled old, like forgotten memories, like something that hadn't been touched in years. And yet, it was not just old. It was alive. I could feel the heartbeat of the house echoing through the walls, through the floor beneath my feet. The silence was oppressive, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Something was watching me. "Welcome to the heart of the house," a voice said, cold and smooth, as if it were a natural part of the room itself. I turned, my pulse racing, and saw the figure again. The one I had seen earlier. The same twisted form, standing tall in the corner of the room, its features obscured in shadow, its eyes glowing faintly. This time, though, there was no smile. It was watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "You've come far," the figure continued, stepping closer, "but you've only begun to see what lies within." I felt my body tense. This wasn't just a figure, it was him. The presence that had been manipulating me from the start. The one who had been watching me, pulling me deeper into the house. This place doesn't just hold us, it holds everything. The figure's voice was colder now, darker. "And now, you're part of it. You can never leave." The words hit me like a blow to the chest. "What do you mean?" I asked, barely able to get the words out. "I don't belong here. I don't want to be part of this." The figure let out a slow, sinister chuckle. "You were always meant to be here." The walls of the room seemed to pulse, and I felt something shift beneath my feet. The ground trembled, and the shadows seemed to close in. I tried to take a step back, but it was like I was trapped, unable to move, as if the room itself had locked me in place. "This is where you belong. This is where you'll stay." I struggled to breathe as the room around me warped, the edges of reality blurring as the darkness closed in. There was no escape. The house had claimed me, and now I was part of its curse. I couldn't breathe. The air around me had thickened, pressing against my chest like a heavy weight. I could feel the shadows closing in around me, creeping along the edges of my vision. The figure, him, was still watching me, its eyes burning into me like it was enjoying my panic. I tried to move, to break free, but my body wouldn't obey. It felt as though the walls of the room had become alive, as if they were tightening around me, trapping me within their confines. I could hear the distant whispering again, louder now, like a low hum coming from the walls themselves. "You're not getting out." The voice wasn't just coming from the figure anymore. It was everywhere. The very air seemed to carry the message, vibrating through my bones. My heart hammered in my chest as I tried to force myself to move, but the paralysis was overwhelming. The shadows closed in further, creeping along the floor, climbing the walls. Every time I looked around, they seemed to get closer, as though they were waiting for me to make my next move. I had to get out. I had to escape before I was completely consumed by whatever force was controlling this place. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't move. "You can't run away." The figure's voice was closer now, almost inside my head. I could feel it, like it was whispering in my mind. "You are already part of the house. You always have been." I shook my head, my thoughts a blur. Number. This wasn't real. This was just a nightmare, just some twisted game that the house was playing with me. I refused to believe that this was my fate. I closed my eyes, trying to shut out the growing sense of dread that was swelling in my chest. I couldn't let it consume me. I had to find a way to fight back, to regain control. There had to be something, anything I could do. But as I opened my eyes, something shifted. The shadows weren't just moving, they were forming. They were taking shape, coalescing into something tangible, something that was no longer just an illusion. The room twisted before my eyes, warping and bending, and I felt the ground beneath my feet shift again, making me lose my balance. I stumbled, reaching out for anything to steady myself, but I couldn't find anything solid. The floor beneath me was now slick, like a thick, viscous liquid, and I felt myself sinking deeper into the darkness. The walls closed in, pressing against me from all sides. "You're part of it now," the voice hissed. The figure stepped closer, its shape becoming more defined, its eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity. "You can't escape. No one escapes the house." The room started to spin, the shadows and walls blending into one mass, and I felt myself being pulled toward the center, like I was falling into a trap I couldn't avoid. My hands reached out, trying to grasp onto something, but there was nothing there. No door, no escape, just the dark, endless void that was consuming me. The figure loomed in front of me now, its form towering over me, blocking out everything else. It was too late. There was no way out. "This is what happens to those who break the rules," it said, its voice like a low, rumbling growl. "This is what happens to those who seek to control what cannot be controlled." I felt a surge of panic flood through me, and for the first time since I entered this cursed place, I realized the truth. This wasn't just a haunted house. This was something alive, something that had been waiting, watching, for someone to cross the line, to break the rules, and I had broken them all. I had opened the door, had stepped inside, had dared to defy the very nature of this place. I was the monster. I had become part of the house. The realization hit me like a bolt of lightning, the weight of it crashing down on me. The figure's grin widened, and I felt the chill seep deeper into my bones. I tried to resist, to fight, but it was no use. The house had already claimed me. I felt myself being pulled closer to the figure, its eyes glowing brighter, more intense. The shadows around us swirled like a storm, a force that I couldn't escape. And then, the figure's hand reached out and touched my forehead, sending a jolt of icy cold through my body. I gasped, feeling the coldness spread, numbing my limbs. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The whispers reached a deafening crescendo, filling my mind, drowning out everything else. "Welcome home." And just like that, the world around me went black. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing in the same hallway where it had all begun. The very same hallway I had crossed just hours ago. The same old wooden floors, the same faded wallpaper, the same cold air that had felt so unnerving. But it wasn't the same. The floor beneath me was slick, almost soft, like the house itself was pulsing, breathing beneath my feet. The shadows in the corners of the hallway seemed deeper now, more alive, and as I took a step forward, I felt them reach for me, like hands pulling me back, trying to hold me in place. I stood still, my breath shallow, panic rising in my chest. This wasn't right. I had just been trapped in a dark, twisted room, surrounded by darkness. The figure, the voice, it was all so real. And yet, here I was, standing in the same hallway, feeling as though I had never left. It was like the house had become a cycle, a repeating loop that couldn't be broken. I felt dizzy, disoriented, like the room was tilting around me as if the very walls were shifting. I looked down at my hands, but they seemed different. There was an unnatural coldness to them, like they weren't mine at all. I reached up to touch my face, but my skin felt numb, as though something had drained all the warmth from me. "You never left." The voice came from behind me, as familiar as it was unsettling. My body stiffened, and I turned slowly, expecting the figure to be there, waiting for me, but there was nothing, just emptiness. The same hallway, the same shadows, the same stillness, except now, something had changed. There was a door in front of me, one I hadn't seen before. The door was made of the same old wood as the others in the house, but it was new, out of place. It wasn't like the other doors, the ones I had passed through. This one felt different. It felt important. It was calling to me, and I couldn't help but step toward it. I reached for the doorknob, the cold metal sending a jolt through my fingers. When I twisted it, the door creaked open, revealing what lay beyond. It was the same room, the same old Victorian wallpaper, the same dim light, the same dusty, decaying furniture, the same mirror that had tormented me before. I stepped into the room, my heart hammering in my chest. This was it. This was the point of no return. There was no escape in the cycle of this house. No matter how hard I tried, I kept coming back to the same place, to the same room, to the same nightmare. And then, there it was again. The figure. It stood in front of the mirror, staring at me, its face still hidden in shadow. But now, I could feel it watching me, its presence so overwhelming I could barely stand. Its eyes, I knew, were trained on me, seeing through every layer of my fear, my confusion. It moved slowly, its footsteps silent, and as it reached out toward me, I felt the weight of its touch before it even made contact. "You're mine now." The voice was thick with finality, with a strange satisfaction that made my skin crawl. "You'll never leave. You'll never escape." I tried to step back, but my body wouldn't obey. It was like my limbs had turned to stone, each step heavier than the last. The door behind me had disappeared. There was no way out. There was no way back. "Why?" I managed to croak, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you doing this to me?" The figure tilted its head slightly, its smile widening just enough to show its teeth. "It's not about what I want. It's about what the house wants." It paused, its form darkening further. "You broke the rules, and now you're part of them. Part of me." The air around me seemed to contract, pulling me inward, suffocating me. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, my heart racing. The walls of the room began to close in on me, the shadows pressing closer, like an invisible force was dragging me deeper into the nightmare. I gasped for air, but there was no air to breathe. I reached for the mirror, but my fingers passed through it like it was nothing more than a reflection. The darkness beyond the glass shifted and writhed, and then I saw it. The hallway outside. The same hallway I had come from, but it wasn't the same anymore. It was alive, a living entity that stretched endlessly, folding in on itself like a maze with no way out. I turned, desperate to escape, but the figure was already there, standing between me and the door. It grinned, that same cold, twisted smile playing on its lips. "You can't escape." Its voice echoed in my mind, filling every corner of my thoughts. "This is your reality now. This is where you'll stay. Forever." And just like that, the room shifted again. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, all of it began to change, to warp and melt into something I couldn't understand. The figure seemed to dissolve into the shadows, its form fading away like smoke in the wind. But the house remained. The whispers, the shadows, the cycle. It would never end. and neither would I.